Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the August 17th, 2021 meeting of the Orange Town Plan and Zoning Commission. I am Commissioner Ozzie Parenti. Let's begin this evening by having those seated at the table introduce themselves, please.
Tamara Trantalis, Administrative Assistant.
Paul Kaplan.
Judy Smith.
Jack Demergen, Zoning Enforcement Officer.
Okay, we're going to be missing Commissioner Tarenti this evening and also Commissioner Cornell. They both had prior engagements, so it'll be just the three of us. All right. Let's begin with item number 1 on our agenda, which is a review of the minutes from the August 3rd, 2021 meeting.
We won't be able to
Can't,
vote on
because
it.
you don't have a quorum, I wasn't here.
Judy would have
You
to
need 3
abstain,
to vote.
and she was not here.
All right. Okay. I guess we'll have to do that next time. We have a quorum, though.
But
So
I have
we
to
can
abstain, because I,
Well, if you abstain, Kaplan and I can vote in favor, and the minutes can be approved. No? Yeah. I mean, we have a
As long as we have
quorum,
3
we have a
votes.
quorum
with 3, okay.
to transact business. So the business, first item on the agenda is the minutes.
Okay.
Paul and I were here, you weren't, you abstained, 2.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I think we can. I had no comments. I'm happy with them as written. Paul, I don't know if you had a chance to look them over.
I'll move that we approve the,
Here's the
You
problem.
can't second a motion.
Well, I don't know if I can, maybe I can. All right, I'm going to second the motion. I think I can. I can't make the motion. I think I can second the motion. So I will second the motion. Did you make it yet?
I was trying to.
All right. But Judy and I interrupted. All right, you.
I'll move that we approve the minutes for the August 3rd, 2021 meeting. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and I will second the motion, assuming I can.
Okay.
And if we find out that that's not the case,
Then we'll do it again.
We'll do it
we'll do it
again.
next.
We'll do it again
We'll do it at our
next,
next meeting. But
next
I'm
meeting.
pretty sure that
I then vote yes.
I didn't ask you.
Yeah, I know, but I wanted to remind you.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we have 1 abstention from Commissioner Smith. All right, so you'll duly record that in the minutes for
Yes.
next time. All right. Next item on the agenda is old business, and I see that Jack noted specifically discussion of short-term rental regulations. We had a pretty lengthy discussion on that at the last meeting. This was the Airbnb
Right.
issue, and I think the consensus was that
It's a
there
problem.
really wasn't much
No.
problematic about.
At this point.
Yeah, no problems created by a lack of regulations.
It was a regulation looking for a problem.
Right, instead of a problem looking for a regulation. So just to confirm, I think, Jack, you mentioned there'd been like 1 issue raised with your office over the last year.
Yeah,
or-
correct. And we just said that we wanted Judy and Kevin to have an opportunity to touch on it if they so desired.
That was my only intention in having it on the agenda tonight, was to give you a chance to say something if you wanted to.
Well, I read a very intelligent quote that said Orange isn't really a destination place. 'Cause we don't have,
And we like it that,
we don't have.
and we like it that way.
I'm here.
Yeah. No,
so-
if we don't have a lot of complaints,
And we
then
don't.
I think we just let it be for now. Oh,
I
I'm green.
Gotta be bright green. There you go.
I think the regulations we'd have to adopt would be pretty convoluted, and I just don't see how it's worth it to get into that whole process.
I think we have to get some issues raised in order to address what's actually happening out there instead of just guessing what might happen in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we sufficiently beat that horse, so
Yeah.
let's leave it at that. If Kevin's got something to say about it, he can raise it under old business next time, but, all right.
Sure.
So anything else under old business that you'd like to bring up? Okay. Next item on the agenda is new business, and this is one of the things we want to talk about is the recreational marijuana sales in Orange. So I guess the question is, you know, are we inclined to prohibit recreational marijuana sales in Orange?
We have the right to do that if it's
And
legal?
Yes,
apparently we
yeah.
do. I mean, at first, I thought that
Falls
wasn't the
up to zoning.
case.
Oh.
But the regulations would permit the zoning commission to prohibit the sale of recreational marijuana anywhere, in any district in the town. Or not.
Or you could just put restrictions on, it's the whole gamut.
So I think tonight what we want to do, I mean, if we're inclined, if we don't want to prohibit or regulate really the sale of marijuana, recreational marijuana in Orange, then we don't need to do anything. But if we think that we want to either prohibit it or regulate it in some way, we need to send it to a public hearing. And we need to hold a public hearing on it. And, you know, town attorney advises that we ought to do that soon, before an application is presented, in which case we'd be, again, if we were interested in prohibiting it, we'd have a more difficulty in doing that.
If we put it on the calendar, we're not bound to do anything other than to listen to the public come in and discuss it along with our discussions.
Well, we would have to have our proposal, like we're banning it or, you know, whatever the text amendment is. We're gonna regulate it with X, Y, Z, and then that's the public hearing. We need a draft of what we think we want to adopt.
Yeah, I don't know if did you print a copy of that memo Vinnie wrote to Jack?
Judy does have one. I have it pulled up right here if anybody wants me to.
The bill, the Senate Bill 1201, Section 148 of Senate Bill 1201 provides that any municipality made by amendment to such municipality zoning regulations or by local ordinance, 1, prohibit the establishment of a cannabis establishment, 2, establish reasonable restrictions regarding the hours and signage within the limits of such municipality, or 3, establish restrictions on the proximity of cannabis establishments to any of the establishments listed in subsection A of subdivision 1 of section 30-46 of the general statutes. So I think what we could do if we wanted is we could say, you know, fine, you could have the retail sale of marijuana for recreational use, but you can't do it within a certain proximity to a church or a school, things like that.
Similar to what we do with liquor or whatever it is.
Right. So, you know, I guess our choices are to prohibit it, establish reasonable restrictions regarding the hours and signage within the limits of such municipality, or establish restrictions on, the proximity of the use to certain other sensitive uses in different zones, different districts.
All right, so there is a tax in section 126, imposes a 3% municipal sales tax on the sale of cannabis. That applies in addition to the state's 6.35 sales tax.
So there would be some benefit
Financial, yep.
to the town. And it says here that they have received phone calls from attorneys representing clients. Sorry.
Yeah.
Vinnie has apparently fielded calls representing clients who are looking for locations.
Yeah.
Not clients, attorneys, sorry.
Now, originally, I thought that this was not something that the Planning and Zoning Commission could, regulate in this fashion.
Well, we
It had
can't
to-
restrict what the state authorizes as legal, I thought.
Well, this is saying
Yeah.
that we can decide not to do it in our town if that's what we want. So I don't know. I mean, we can't send it to a public hearing without some indication of how we,
That's why I was thinking was that we would like to get some public input, but we have to take a position before we get the public input.
and then change our mind, I guess.
Right afterward.
Well,
yeah.
Or not.
Right.
You know.
I mean, and we definitely need to hear from the full commission, I think, from Kevin and Tom.
Sure.
Yeah. At some point, or you mean,
Soon,
or
yeah.
you mean tonight, or?
No, I mean at our next meeting, because I just
Send
don't
up
think
smoke.
the three of
You
us.
hesitate to send it to a public hearing.
No, I think it,
We have to do something, otherwise they're going to be done for
Well,
us.
that's what,
Right.
yeah, so you're not saying wait to decide whether to send it to a
no, I
public
think we,
hearing
we
until the
think we
rest of the
should go to
commission's here.
public hearing.
We can't.
I don't think we can decide, or I, you know, have to think of, more. I want to hear the input
Right.
Yeah.
from our commission members on the pros and the cons.
So the sending to the public hearing would be after we discuss it amongst ourselves as a full commission.
In my opinion, yeah.
Yeah. And we're
I
taking
think
the
it'll
risk.
help us get a position unless,
Right. Those eyes tell me that you wanted to do it faster.
I don't know if we can, I think we need to sort of, I mean, the purpose of the public hearing is to adopt a regulation. And that regulation is, the question is what? You know, is it a regulation which would prohibit recreational marijuana, or regulate it in some way, or leave it alone?
right, and I'm saying I would like the input of the other two commission members to get to that point.
I agree. I mean, or I don't disagree with that. But all I'm saying is, you know, can we do a proper legal notice without a proposed regulation?
How much meat do we have to put on the bones?
You'd have to check the binning.
Right.
Well, what's your feeling on it generally?
You know
you
what?
have no opinion on it.
Yeah, no, my instinct is that if it's legal in the state of Connecticut, and we're gonna make money off it, unless you have some kind of, I don't have any objection to it. I think it should be regulated, and, you know, set up similar regulations to we have, that you actually were citing for liquor and, or, away from houses of worship, reasonable times. I don't want 24 hours, you know, but I think that goes into our general business. It should be in the commercial zone.
Yeah.
And we probably should regulate how many. But to prohibit it, I don't feel
Believe-
strongly against it, but I don't think we should
I
prohibit
believe
it.
there is language indicating how many you are allowed within a municipality dependent on population
Yeah,
total.
yep. I think that was-
Yeah.
for over 50,000.
You know, the one thing that sort of struck me is, you know, we're always very concerned about traffic. And I wonder if, you know, Orange became a spot to stop at, to, you know,
Now we
buy.
are a destination.
Yeah,
Now we gotta get the Airbnb rights going.
And we are a
No,
destination.
but I mean, if you don't think West Haven and Milford are gonna do it, so it's not like we're gonna be
Well,
the
no,
only town
but
within.
people aren't gonna be getting off Marsh Hill Road exit to come to the Post Road to buy recreational marijuana.
I don't think this is going to increase or decrease the usage, so it's just a question of the destination. And there will be other 169 towns, there are going to be other towns doing
Yeah.
this. Yeah. I don't want to make too much out of it, because I think it's,
Right.
30 years ago would have been a little bit different. Now it's kind of, well, I mean, it's legal in the state of Connecticut, if I understand it correctly.
It is, as of
Right.
July 1st.
But not federally yet, right? So they're not going to be
Right.
putting it into federal chartered banks probably.
Correct. Right.
It's very strange. Okay.
All right, then, it sounds like what we want to do is fashion some kind of notice.
Well, if we have, I think if we have to take a position as a board, I think Judy's point is well taken, that we should have Kevin and Tommy here to chime in as to what they think too. If we don't have to take a position and just put a notice that we're going to have discussions about, you know, possible regulations of cannabis, then at that point, I don't think we need them here to just open the door to go in, you know, to have a public hearing.
You know, I guess, you know, at a public hearing, we could hear testimony, close the public hearing, and decide that we want to, for example, prohibit
But the testimony is always based upon a proposed regulation.
Right.
I know, but what is that, right? Do you know what
No,
that?
that's why I'm saying maybe the five of us could come up with a consensus, and maybe
Well,
we
then-
say we want
then-
to allow it and regulate
then-
out the heck out of
Then
it.
what you're saying is, we're not going to have a public hearing next meeting.
How
Good.
can you? You can't even get notice out.
Well, it's gonna be 3 weeks until the next meeting. There's an extra Tuesday.
before we could
We could do a special meeting with the commission,
I'm fine for that.
quick, I mean, soon. When we
Well-
get it noticed, and then just have a little dialogue and
Could
try-
we get out a notice in time for the next,
For a special meeting?
no,
public hearing.
For a public hearing, yes, if we have 3 full weeks, what's the date of the next hearing? Or, meeting?
Sep-
September 8th, September 21st.
We do have time, we would have to get it out this week or very early next week,
all right.
which I don't have an issue doing. But we would I think we would have to,
What I'm suggesting is that if we get a public hearing on our agenda for the next meeting, I think there's time to do that.
But the notice doesn't have to take a position.
I think
Well,
it-
to finish my thought
Oh, good.
on that, we could hold the public hearing based on the testimony we hear and our discussion.
What
We
is
could
it on the
vote.
agenda as? Public hearing for what?
To consider a proposed amendment to the zoning regulations regarding the recreational use of marijuana. And then when we get to the public hearing, we hear testimony, we close the public hearing, we have our discussion. And if we could decide to,
If we can do that based on what, that would be the public hearing, that's fine. But I thought we had to my thought was that we had to take
I
a
think we
position.
would, because then what would we be voting on? We would have to draft
well, we could.
a
Regulation.
regulation
Right.
before, obviously, we vote on it. So depending on what we hear from the public, we would have to draft it and then come back.
And do
So we
another
could open the
public
public hearing and then keep it open, based on what we hear, and then come back at the next meeting with a proposal based on what we heard at the original.
I don't know, I think your notice would be deficient then.
correct.
I think you'd have to go
Right, you-
back and
Right, you
renotice.
notice
I
it
agree.
with what the reg is that you
And-
think you want to
and-
adopt.
So I think we
Notice
do have to
the-
take some sort of stance in order to properly legal notice something like this. Because we have to have language prepared for that public hearing.
So how about if we take a position, and again, I think I'm with Judy in terms of taking a position without the other two members, but if we took a position, we listened to testimony, we decided that we didn't like our position, do we have within our powers to change our minds?
Well, we
Well, you
could
can
vote
deny it.
not to
Just-
adopt
yeah.
the regulation.
Right.
You can deny it and then come back with another one.
And that's right.
It's all on our own initiative.
Right.
It's not something.
We're not bound by any particular, by the notices, my point.
No. I think what Ozzy is also getting at is time could potentially be of the essence.
Well, that's the only reason why.
Right.
I mean, we could have a meeting, we could have our next meeting in September and hopefully have a full commission at that time and discuss this to a greater extent and then hopefully decide what we'd like to see happen.
Draft a regulation
Draft-
for the next public or for the next meeting to schedule a public hearing.
Yeah, I mean, I think then you probably wouldn't have wouldn't have enough time between our two regular meetings in September to properly notice a public hearing
Yeah,
for
we
the
might
second
not,
meeting.
because it might be.
There's only 2
right,
weeks.
Yeah, it might be 2 weeks.
So,
Can I ask a question before, is it allowed in our current regulations right now,
What?
a cannabis store?
It's retail.
retail.
So it could,
So there's no laundry list in our regulations as to what retail composed of?
correct.
Yeah, okay.
So when the state made it legal,
That opens the door.
Right. Because anything not specifically listed in the regs are assumed prohibited, and that is written there. And that was my first thought as
Right.
well, but it could also be construed as retail as well.
Yeah. So, how do you want to proceed?
Well, I thought we could reach some kind of consensus tonight as to what we thought, at least preliminarily. With, obviously we're not bound by that. I mean, I personally don't see any real value to the town. What is there, some surtax? Or some-
3%.
That's minimal.
Yeah.
Depending on
I
how
mean, that's
much-
not something we normally consider anyway when we're deciding an application or amending our regulations, but. So I didn't see any particular value in it. It doesn't, I don't think it'll so adversely affect our retail, our commercial zone, our commercial districts.
But do we pass upon? You're heading in the direction of prohibition?
Right.
Do we generally take into account the type of business I'm assuming it's legal, type of business that's being run?
No, I guess you make a good point there. Because there may be,
I mean, there are times when we do, we certainly have. When it's strip clubs and things like
Yeah.
that.
We do have specific regulations for adult use establishments.
Adult uses.
Yeah.
I mean, I think tonight, we're in no position really to say what restrictions we would impose on it.
Right.
I mean, you make a good point. I mean, there's really no reason not to have it if we can regulate it in a way that we think protects the town from any potential adverse effects from it.
We don't do anything right now. We are
Right.
open to people coming in with an application. It is what it is, so they may sneak it in before we're able to take an action. But
Right.
I think we should consider it, and I think we should consider it with the full board, and then, act accordingly,
So, I mean, is it possible to try to have a special meeting with the full board? And if we can do it soon enough, try to get notice out for a public hearing on the 21st? Could we fast track it?
We could. The special meeting would have to happen this week.
I don't think they're okay.
Is everybody in town?
Wasn't Kevin on his honeymoon or something?
Yeah, but he was returning today. He wasn't sure how early he'd
Oh,
get back
okay.
today. But I think after today, he's.
If we could
he's
get a full
available.
board on Thursday or Friday of this week, then I could have the legal notice appear in time as well. The legal notice in the paper, and I'll have to get the notice. Well, the other thing is I'll also have to get the notice to the regional planning authorities. And it really depends on when they get back to me, because they have 30 days.
If you call them, I bet you they'll take it.
Yeah.
Also, does that notice for the special meeting
Mm-hmm.
go out to the public?
It gets filed in the town clerk's office
It gets filed, but I
And
don't.
posted.
Right.
and posted on
So
the.
before I go any further, do we want input at the time that we're doing the public, that we're having our special meeting, or is it just?
No, that's just for,
just-
your mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that, Tom. Yeah, no, it's just for us, but
Right.
do we want to open it up, or is that just going to be, that'll be for the public hearing?
My goal of that meeting is
Yeah.
to just try to get us a consensus. Do we want to ignore it?
Right.
Do we want to prohibit? Do we want to regulate?
But we're not going to be in a. Let's say we agree that we want to regulate it. Then what?
And
Then we
Vinny's got a
the
draft.
So, yeah, I mean, so it's
And then,
time.
then go to the public hearing. Yeah, I mean, I would call Vinny tomorrow
Yeah,
and let him know
yeah.
your time frame. And
But I mean, we could hold a public hearing, on the merits of, permitting or regulating the recreational use of marijuana in Orange. And what I'm saying is hold that public hearing.
I would ask Vinny if that's too broad.
Yeah.
Talking about the notice saying
Right,
on the merits.
correct.
I think we need a specific application to hold a public hearing
Can you ask Vinny
for.
tomorrow as to whether or not that's going to be too broad, just the fact of
Right.
discussion about, possible regulation of
Mm-hmm.
cannabis in Orange.
Or we just take this as it comes, you know what I mean? I mean, we have a meeting first week of September, and we put it on our agenda and try to come to some consensus as to what we want to do. I mean, I know somebody could sneak in with an application, but I mean, given the
only thing you can do.
yeah, given the timeframes that we're bound by
Right.
statute, I mean,
If Vinnie says that the broad language that you would kind of propose
yeah,
is
but
sufficient.
think about it. That's not really going to work. Now that I think of, I mean, because then whatever we decided at that public hearing, then we'd have to draft the regulation
right, you gotta-
accordingly.
right,
And then you'd have to-
renotice in another public hearing.
Yeah. So I mean, we're not saving ourselves any time.
More brief.
I think the best thing to do is
Put it on
do
the
it
agenda.
in an orderly fashion, decide what we want to do, and then take it from there.
Yep.
And keep in mind, just if say we do get an application, it wouldn't necessarily have to come in front of the board if they're in a location that is currently retail permitted. So if they're not having any site changes and they wouldn't have a site plan having to come in front of the commission and be approved, if they're just taking over an existing retail space, they wouldn't necessarily need zoning approval.
Well, that's why,
Well, but
So that's something to keep in mind as well.
that's the chance that we're taking.
Right.
We have to act orderly. It doesn't make, I mean, we just went through the gyrations.
Right, if there's,
It's not gonna work.
yeah, I mean, that use, well, if it's permitted as of right, you're saying we never get a look at it. So we never get a look, never get an opportunity to consider, for example, traffic implications.
Right, if there's a
correct.
restaurant and one leaves and another comes in and they don't do any site work, we never would know of it.
the most they would have to submit to my office is a sign permit.
Unless the state law provides otherwise, and it doesn't appear that that's the case.
Not from what I know, or unless an argument could be made that it's not a retail use. But,
Yeah, the only thing I could think of on that would be it's not legal under federal law. But again, I don't know that that's our problem anyway. All right, it looks like we're not going to reach any kind of consensus on it tonight. Let's put it on our agenda.
so we're trying to go for a special meeting this week,
Or
or
do you want to not do that? I was trying to, I mean, I sense your sense of urgency, so I put it out there that
Yeah.
we could, but,
No, I mean, I have to say I was sort of 50-50 on whether I favored the idea or not, but yeah, Paul makes a good point. If it's legal, we may only want to regulate it,
I think we wanna do something.
Yeah.
Ozzy, will you take comment?
Sure.
Good evening, Mitch Goldblatt, 291 Drummond Road, and you certainly are in a conundrum here. I feel for the discussion you've just gone through. I just have a couple questions and then a couple comments. Questions are, first of all, can somebody tell me when your next meeting is scheduled? The first meeting of September is?
8,
the 8th.
So it's a Wednesday, right?
Yes.
Okay,
That's 3 weeks from tonight.
all right. No, 3 weeks from tomorrow, right?
3 weeks from tomorrow.
3 weeks from tomorrow. Yeah, it's a Wednesday.
Because it's a holiday or something.
Right.
Correct.
Right, and just so you're aware, the Board of Selectmen is also meeting on the 8th. And at the Board of Selectmen meeting, we are going to be having a public hearing concerning the recreational use of cannabis, recreational marijuana on public spaces and outdoor restaurants. So just so you know, that night is already going to be, we'll be over at High Plains, and that night's already going to be a discussion of some form of this. I agree with what Judy had to say, though. I think you're stuck into how you're going to proceed if you don't have an actual regulation.
Right.
Unless you have some sort of just public meeting for
right, I thought
input,
about that, yeah.
without any
Non-binding,
just to
right,
get
public
information,
meeting.
just a
Right.
public meeting, not
Right.
official
That's almost
public
what the
hearing.
Board of Selectmen
But that
are
doesn't
going
get
to be
us down-
doing as well.
Well, we have to have a public hearing. By law, it's a public hearing, but we have, Vinny has drafted a regulation for us, by the way, just so you know, it's to outlaw the use of marijuana in public spaces and public property, as well as in restaurants, which, you know, smoking is not allowed inside restaurants. We now have the ability to stop outside, and that would include all smoking. It's not just marijuana you can't smoke, and that's part of the regulation that's being proposed. Well, for your, it certainly is, it's an interesting zoning situation to get into, and I think it's, like I say, it may be your best bet just to, at some point, have a public meeting. You may just do what Paul said and just let the chips fall where they may if you get an application. It is an interesting situation. My only comments at this point, since this isn't really a public hearing, though, is we allow liquor stores, we have gun shops, we have pharmacies, which are just as regulated as these are going to be. We have smoke shops, cigar shops. So I don't see, you know, if somebody came in today and made an application, I don't see where the town would really have standing really to deny it, put restrictions as you would any other type of use like that. But I don't think it should be denied. And also the fact that, Ozzy, you mentioned the revenue may not sound like much. 3% of sales could be significant to the town. And we don't get, right now, as I think all of you realize, you know, the revenue we receive from all our retail is just from the property tax and the personal property tax. We receive nothing on the sales. Now, all that goes to the state. This is the first that I know of, the first retail establishment that sales will actually go to help the coffers of the town of Orange, or any town that has it. So, as I think Judy said before, if West Haven is going to probably have this business and Milford's probably going to have this business, I don't see why we should be left out in the cold here for something that can, I think, actually will benefit us. So those are my comments. I appreciate you letting me speak this evening.
Thank you,
I
Mitch. That
appreciate
was
getting your
helpful.
comments.
Okay, thank
That was helpful.
Thank you.
Well, you know, I think we need to, it sounds like we are getting to a consensus. I don't think we're of a mind to prohibit. And I don't think, yeah, no, but just for purposes of taking the next step on this thing, it doesn't sound like amongst the three of us we're interested in prohibiting.
I'm not interested in voting.
Right. So I think we are interested in doing something. We're not interested in doing nothing.
Right.
So I think what we need to do is work with Vinny to draft a reasonable regulation of, you know, the recreational use, so that we are that much closer to preparing a proper notice for a public hearing.
Got it.
I mean, it's
Mitch, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mitch said something that I think is more along the lines of what I was hoping for. Was like, how do we do a public meet? I mean, I don't know if
Right.
we've ever done a public meeting.
Right. So I think we could. It's like non-binding. It's just a public meeting and you take public input, and that might help us, you know, get a consensus or develop a reg. It also adds time. You know.
I don't know. I think I'd be inclined to draft a regulation
And then let the chips fall where
and that we can discuss, you know, work on that with Vinny, and I'll work on it. You and I will work with Vinny on that.
Are you aware of any other towns that have regs yet?
No, not to my knowledge.
Newington.
Okay.
Newington?
Thanks, Mitch. Okay.
But I think it's probably something Vinny could put together pretty quickly, because I think we are of the same mind on the type of restrictions we're talking about. You know, the proximity to places of worship, schools,
Right.
you know, the same kind of stuff that applies for a liquor store. So maybe that's the way we'll leave it tonight.
So hold off on the special meeting.
I don't see a point in a special meeting because we don't have a
Agreed.
regulation to
Right.
talk about. So
So-
let's get a regulation to talk about and put that on our agenda for the next meeting.
Well, and even if the other two were of the mind to prohibit, it sounds like the three of us are of the mind to.
for other reasons.
Right.
Oh, you know,
No, honestly, I came tonight, I was thinking about prohibiting, but through
Yeah,
the
me too.
dialogue, and that's
Me too.
why it's good to have
but I
the
think
input
Mitch
of.
makes a good point. We have gun shops, we have, you know, liquor stores, we have, other uses that, people may have some objection to. But- All right, so are we clear on what we're doing? We're
Get
gonna
in touch with Vin tomorrow, start working on drafting a regulation.
that we can
that-
put on our agenda for our, not a public hearing, but for our discussion.
Okay, so no public hearing on the 8th.
Right, because we don't have a regulation to send to,
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. It would take, probably wouldn't get a response from.
I mean, he can send a
what I'm-
draft
What I'm sending,
to all of us.
sure, and we should do that, of course. But what I'm saying is we're not going to have a regulation to consider until we meet again at our first meeting in September. And then if we can reach a consensus on that regulation, we'll notice a public hearing for hopefully for the second meeting in September. If that's not possible, then the first meeting in October.
Got it.
Well, if he drafts a reg and we have it for the September 8th meeting, and we just tweak it a little, like, we're not gonna write the reg on the 8th, we're gonna get it before.
But we're not going to have a public hearing on the 8th.
Right, no, but we can fine tune
Yeah,
the text that we get from Vinnie by the 8th.
yeah, and then the final the final regulation will be a part of the notice for the public hearing.
Exactly, right.
Both Jack and Tammy brought to our attention about the need to notice regional authority. Can we do that earlier or no?
Again, we don't have a regulation
Yeah,
yet.
we'd have to
We
send
have to
them
get the
exact
regulation.
language.
All right.
I mean, the question is, what are we talking about? I mean, we know what we're talking about, but we don't have it written down.
I stand by what I said, though. When I was on that board, if someone had called the chairman, they would have kicked up the, and dealt with it earlier.
Got it.
All right, so let's leave it at that. We'll work with Vinnie to draft I have a pretty good idea of what we're looking for. And we'll work with Vinnie to draft a regulation that we can consider with the whole commission present at our next regular meeting.
Perfect.
And if we agree on, the form and content to that proposed amendment,
forward.
we'll send it to a public hearing as soon thereafter as possible, based on, the timeframes applicable.
Sounds like a plan to me.
All right. Is there any other new business?
Only, how are we doing on keeping our meetings alive here? Any issues or problems so far?
I haven't heard anything.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
We are asking members of the public to be masked in town hall now, because obviously we don't have anybody at the door checking vaccination cards or anything.
Right.
Employees can still be unmasked. We know everybody here is vaccinated, but to be determined, I think. I know the cases are going up per the health inspector, but
In Orange,
yes.
Okay. All right, that takes care of item 3 on our agenda. Item 4 is a report of the zoning enforcement officer. Jack?
So I wanted to go over, and I printed out a couple sections here, which I'm going to hand out. Minor stuff, but something I wanted to go over, and I know I mentioned it briefly last meeting about commercial activity in the residential zone. Specifically on the first page here, 4A, referring to vehicles in the residential zone that are allowed to be there, whether covered or allowed, period. This regulation, to me, seems like it hasn't been looked at in a long time, being that it says every vehicle that has a state of Connecticut combination plate and is not, any vehicle with a combination plate has to be stored in a garage. Now today, that's almost every single pickup truck. Almost every pickup truck in Connecticut has a combination plate. So this has been one of the regulations that is often cited to me by residents who are looking for something to do with, maybe a neighbor or a contractor that they've had issues with or something like that, or they feel as though because their commercial vehicles are, being targeted that, other people with commercial vehicles should. And this regulation doesn't in my opinion, properly disseminate between the two of a vehicle with a combination plate or a commercial vehicle used for specifically commercial activity. So like I said, almost every pickup truck in Connecticut is not a passenger vehicle. I think the DMV standard is the percentage of the vehicle that is used for passenger seating. So almost every pickup truck, to my knowledge, is going to have a combination plate.
You're saying that this has been raised before you as a problem?
Correct. It's been cited to me as a problem and is known throughout town because it is, one of those regulations that is very difficult to enforce. Like I said, every single pickup truck would essentially have to be covered in a garage, which I wanted to bring up to the commission as might be something that we want to look at, because people are kind of using this as he has a pickup truck that he drives to work every day. Can that be used, or can that be considered a commercial vehicle, and does it have to be in a garage, even though it's just used as an everyday traveling vehicle?
With the thought being of taking the limitation, keeping the limitations, but having that particular, pickup truck being able to be outside of, not having to be covered, so to speak.
Right. If a pickup truck is registered to a commercial business, it will have a commercial plate.
Bless.
Yeah.
Bless you. If it's registered to a resident, then it's going to have most likely a combination plate. So having the restrictions on the combination plate seemed to me like it was a little too restrictive in the sense that, again, people drive a pickup truck in town and they're not
So
enclosed in a
the
garage.
restrictions you're talking about are the language, provided that such vehicle is owned or operated by a resident of the dwelling, and the vehicle is parked or stored only in an enclosed garage or accessory building and does not exceed 7,500 pounds gross weight.
Correct. And 7,500 pounds, it's roughly the size of, your standard for the Ford F-250.
That much, really?
Yeah. So, normally they're right around there. Some mid-sized trucks like that you'll find under that weight. Some will be over. So I don't know if we wanted to change that number as well. I know the DMV is 12,500 pounds. Anything over that is considered a commercial vehicle. Anything under that could potentially be a combination plate or anything else. But 7,500 pounds, in my opinion, again, was a little bit light for, people who do want to drive, they have a big trailer. They need a F-350 to tow it.
So do you know how you would amend this regulation?
I would, again, in my opinion, would get rid of the combination plate language in the sense that, again, a combination plate does not constitute a commercial vehicle. If a vehicle is registered to a business, it will have a commercial plate. So I would get rid of that line, and that would pretty much solve it, because if we still feel as though we want to regulate commercial vehicles and keep them in an enclosed garage, then that would still be in there. But my point was getting rid of the combination plate and possibly increasing the maximum weight of the vehicle. But I guess, to be fair, if we get rid of the combination plate, then we really wouldn't have to amend the weight, because, again, it'd be all commercial vehicles anyways.
Yeah, so, I mean, at the end of the day, what you're saying is if it's a commercial vehicle,
That's got
it's
to be in
got
a
to be
garage.
enclosed.
Correct. It still would have to be.
Okay.
And a combination would be just regular.
Well,
It's
he's,
a regular pickup
It
truck.
could be in a parking,
Yeah.
a driveway.
he's talking about deleting the reference to.
It would just be regular.
It's either-
passenger.
And maybe up the weight to 12.5.
Which, again, we wouldn't have to necessarily do. I think it would be beneficial because, again, your pickup trucks normal pickup trucks are exceeding that weight. But if we get rid of the combination plate, then, again, it only refers to commercial plated vehicles. And, again, all any vehicle that's registered to a business is going to have a commercial plate, whether it's a pickup truck or a van or even a smaller sized vehicle.
All right. So we're not really changing the concept here.
No.
No.
Concept is if you have a vehicle used for commercially,
Right.
and it has advertising on it, or, well.
No, it has a commercial plate.
It has a
Correct.
commercial plate.
That's
It
all it
has to be
needs.
inside.
And that's something else that I was going to touch on kind of on the next page here, where I've had not a lot of issues, but I've had some issues from residents for when a citation shall be issued. And number 6 is illegal commercial activity in the residence district. Now, enforcement is discretionary, and I do not feel as though, for instance, a resident uses his truck to go to work every day. He's a small-time carpenter or HVAC. Yeah, but it's also what constitutes commercial activity. Is him getting up in the morning, loading up his truck with hand tools, couple 2x4s, whatever material he would need that day, no commercial, equipment, nothing crazy. That, in my opinion, would not constitute commercial activity.
Yeah.
That is getting up in the morning and
Well, just there's a difference between loading and use, I think. I think you're right to make that delineation.
Right.
Definitely.
And I also think you're going down a road that if on the side of it says raise plumbing, just the raised plumbing is not necessarily commercial activity, meaning the sign on the side of the.
Right.
Although
it could be misconstrued as advertisement.
Well, that's
a sign in the residence district,
Good luck
which is
with
why
that.
which is something actually that we could also refer to in 4A.
Right.
Is
It's gotta
any
be in a garage.
advertisement on the
Right.
side of a
Then it's gotta be
vehicle
back in the
means
garage.
it is commercial.
there you go. Okay.
So we could do that as well. But that kind of feeds into the illegal commercial activity, because I've been getting complaints that, well, he has a pickup truck, or he or she has a pickup truck, and they used to go to work every day. And technically, that pickup truck should be in a garage right now or not on the property at all. So they kind of go hand in hand, where a lot of these small-time contractors are facing troubles like that, because the people obviously who have large commercial vehicles, that are clearly outside of the boundaries.
Well, take your example of the carpenter, right? Let's say he's building. He's got a commercial truck, and he's using his garage to build cabinets, to build a bookcase. He's going to load on that truck, take to the job site for installation. I mean, I think there's the commercial activity is the building of the bookcases on site, right? I mean, the commercial activity isn't necessarily having the truck.
Right. I agree. If somebody is building something on the premises that is not meant to be used on the premises, if it's not for the residents
Right.
there, and it's,
He's conducting
I agree as well. But if he's using, or if let's say he's just taking his material in his pickup truck, unmarked, not a commercial, but it has a combination plate, then that's still technically by today's regulation.
Right, that's what you want to amend.
And that's what I want to amend. I feel as though it's too restrictive and
everybody's got a
clearly
pickup
and it
truck.
hasn't been amended since it was written, or else there would be an amended note beneath it. So
Numerous. I mean, that would be ridiculous to try to regulate a pickup
Right.
truck in a driveway with no markings otherwise.
right,
yeah, and it makes sense because again, there's no really commercial use. I mean, the regulations are designed to keep commercial uses out of or highly regulated in the residential district.
I agree. That's why I was really bringing it up, because I think it would be very standard to amend these, obviously, to be kind of realistic, quite honestly, because
Right.
it would
Right.
be
Yeah.
unreasonable to assume that every single pickup truck in town had to be in an enclosed garage.
It would be
Regardless of commercial
an
use or
enforcement
not.
nightmare,
Right.
just like the Airbnb thing. All right. Well, is there a consensus that we should draft some amendment to these Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd be happy to bring a draft to the next meeting. I'll get it to everybody before the next
No, that's
meeting,
a
but
good
we can
idea.
talk about it then.
Yes, get it on our agenda for the next meeting if you can accomplish that. And then if again, we reach a consensus on that amendment, we can send it to a public
Public
hearing.
hearing, maybe the same date as the marijuana
I
one.
mean, It's lining up to be that's the case. All right, that's a good idea. Thank you, Jack.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you. That's all I had.
All right, well, that concludes our agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Click on the trigger.
So moved.
Well, so if I can't second the, oh, no, no.
I second the motion.
We can't ever
I
leave.
second that motion.
All right, we have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you.
Thank you.